faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today, we're exploring a book titled Loneliness with the subtitle Returning to the Self. This book will help you rediscover loneliness and learn to embrace it. Um, for a long time, whenever loneliness is mentioned, the images that come to mind are probably not very pleasant, like someone dragging their tired body home after work, but finding no one at home, or during festive seasons, a lonely person facing a single portion meal, looking utterly desolate. Many parents pressuring marriage often say, I just worry you'll be alone when old. Even some great philosophers hold biases against solitude. Aristotle asserted humans are most social creatures, claiming solitary people are either beasts or gods. But is loneliness truly worthless? If someone doesn't form close relationships, can they not survive? Of course not. After this book, you'll find loneliness not only less frightening, but essential to life. Especially for creatively gifted people, solitude may be crucial for fulfilling life's purpose. Before delving deeper, let's introduce the author. Anthony Storr had two key identities: psychiatrist and writer, excelling remarkably at both. As psychiatrist, he was senior fellow at Royal College of Psychiatrists. As writer, he authored 12 books and was senior fellow at Royal Society of Literature. Thus, Storr was hailed as UK's most literary psychiatrist. His childhood was profoundly lonely. Sent to boarding school at 8, shy and nervous, poor at games, he was often bullied and struggled making friends. Fortunately, he later found refuge by listening to classmates' problems, avoiding exclusion. He loved music, singing, playing viola and piano, hobbies crucial for coping with solitude. Having deeply experienced loneliness, Storr understood its vital significance in life. In this book, Loneliness, Returning to the Self, he deeply analyzes the spiritual worlds of geniuses like Kant, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, and Gauguin. Defending loneliness, renowned psychologist Zhang Haiying, after reading this book, said, "So what about loneliness? When you're full of loneliness inside, but force yourself to join the crowd just to fit in socially or meet others' expectations, isn't that even sadder? It's better to follow your own heart and walk your own path alone." This book has 160,000 words total. I'll guide you through understanding loneliness with 3 questions. First, why can lonely people also live well? Second, what is loneliness? Third, how important is loneliness to us? Let's start with the first question. Why can lonely people also live well? For a long time, people have thought that to live well, one must have intimate relationships. The original meaning of intimate relationships refers to a very harmonious relationship between two people, regardless of age or gender. But nowadays, in most cases, it actually refers to marital or romantic relationships. Why must one have intimate relationships to live well? The reason is simple. We generally believe that to be happy, one's life must be filled with love, and good intimate relationships can provide a constant, unending flow of love. That's why many psychologists and psychiatrists tirelessly emphasize that intimate relationships are the only path to happiness and even meaning in life. Storr doesn't deny that intimate relationships bring us happiness. But if we arbitrarily say that only intimate relationships can bring happiness, even you might find it puzzling. Reading, traveling, gaming, watching movies alone, without connecting with anyone, can also bring joy and enjoyment. Many great figures we know also cherish solitude. Just to name a few: Descartes, Newton, Kant, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein. If we grade them on whether they established intimate relationships, these people clearly fail because they remained single for most of their lives, didn't marry or have children, nor formed intimate relationships with others. But if we simplistically and crudely say that these people didn't live well, that's hard to justify. For instance, Edward Gibbon, the British historian who wrote the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, experienced passionate love in his youth but gave it up due to his father's strong opposition. After that, he never formed any so-called intimate relationships for the rest of his life, yet lived quite freely and happily. Besides immersing himself in research and writing, he was a member of several London clubs and was an utterly active participant. Also, his charming conversation earned him admiration from many. Moreover, he felt deep gratitude for his aunt, who raised him single-handedly and had many close friends he could confide in. But regarding marriage, he quickly let go of any attachment and later even publicly expressed gratitude for his free and carefree life. Fortunately, he didn't impulsively marry back then. From his words, you'd never think he was unhappy. In fact, viewing intimate relationships as life's top priority is a modern development. For human ancestors, work, food, and survival were their main concerns. With modern industrial development, people's mobility increased and opportunities for cooperation grew. Additionally, as religious beliefs declined, people began valuing interpersonal relationships more. But even then, we can't simplistically equate all relationships with intimate ones. Our connections with colleagues and friends are equally vital. In life, some happily married people feel something missing if they quit jobs after marriage or drift from their friend circles. As mentioned earlier with Gibbon, though lacking intimate relationships, he found happiness through rich social activities. Moreover, a person's happiness and life's meaning don't solely depend on relationship quality. Often, self-worth comes from work and interests, especially for creative geniuses whose achievements stem from solitude. Newton is a prime example. He lived a solitary life, not only without intimate relationships, but also with few friends. He rarely visited others or hosted guests. His life revolved around shutting himself in for research. It's said that Newton was incredibly focused on his research, often forgetting to eat. The meals assistants brought in often remained untouched. If reminded, he'd stand there and take a bite or two. Assistants said you'd almost never see him at the dining table. He often worked until dawn. We can imagine that without gaining enough happiness and satisfaction from it, anyone would struggle to maintain such intense flow. Author Storr believes you might not agree with or even dislike Newton's solitary lifestyle, that you should acknowledge that they're doing what they love, achieving extraordinary feats, which is another form of happiness, or further, they've truly realized their life's purpose. Just as the book's subtitle says, returning to the self, even Freud saw it that way. When asked about factors for mental health, Freud answered the ability to love and to work. But later, people overemphasized the former, the ability to love, while ignoring the latter. If Newton's example feels too distant, look around. You'll find people who see dating and marriage as too troublesome and uninteresting, but bring up their work or hobbies like programming, painting, playing music, flower arranging, etc. Their eyes light up and they get so excited they don't want to sleep. And this is the first point I've shared with you. Lonely people can also live well. In Storr's view, having deep, intimate relationships is one form of happiness, but enjoying solitude's freedom, spending time with friends, or immersing in a beloved field to achieve greatness is another kind. These two forms of happiness are essentially equal, just like choosing left or right when leaving home, merely different choices for different destinations. As the saying goes, two people have their joy, one person has their freedom. No matter your choice, you can live quite well. Hearing this, do you get a certain feeling? So loneliness can actually be lived so wonderfully. So what exactly is loneliness? Now, let's explore the second question together. What is loneliness? Storr believes loneliness is both an ability and a choice. First, Let's explain why it's considered an ability. You might find it strange. Isn't loneliness just being alone? Isn't that easy? How could it qualify as an ability? If you truly think that, you're oversimplifying solitude. Just observe yourself or others. Some genuinely enjoy being alone, while others feel anxious when alone, desperately seeking company. In Store's view, only those with inner security can enjoy loneliness. Your Store references renowned psychoanalyst Winnicott's perspective. Winnicott believed the capacity for solitude develops in childhood. Before age 5, quality alone time with caregivers determines future ability to be alone. Typically, the caregiver is the mother. With secure attachment, a child doesn't fear abandonment and can begin solitary exploration in her presence. Like freely touching furniture, examining their reflection, or playing with toys. In adulthood, though, the mother isn't present. Those early solitary experiences and sense of security remain ingrained. Thus, regardless of company, they feel secure, able to manage time and savor solitude. This is how one develops the capacity for solitude. Conversely, children without secure maternal attachment constantly fear separation. Even with their mother nearby, they can't focus on activities, attention fixated on her. Such individuals grow up feeling unsettled whenever alone. Therefore, those with solitude capacity possess inherent security and self-connection. Moreover, for many, solitude is a conscious personal choice. The most striking examples here are Kant and Gauguin. Kant's life was undeniably solitary. He devoted most of his time to work, maintaining a rigorous schedule for decades where even his daily walks were precisely timed. Neighbors could set their clocks by him. As for intimate relationships, though Kant often admired women and seriously considered marriage several times, he ultimately abandoned those plans. Not only did he remain unmarried lifelong, but he also grew distant from his siblings. So, though they lived in the same city, they didn't meet for 25 years. One brother wrote to Kant hoping to rekindle their sibling bond, yet Kant remained silent for 2.5 years before replying, saying he'd been too busy to respond but cherished their kinship. Despite his words, he never met his brother. Having relinquished intimacy, Kant refined his scholarly pursuits. He achieved greatness across philosophy, ethics, aesthetics, astronomy, and more. His famous declaration, "I am solitary, I am free, I am my own emperor." His solitude radiated formidable confidence. For his academic endeavors, Kant never formed intimate relationships. Meanwhile, French post-impressionist painter Gauguin abandoned existing relationships for his beloved art. And Gauguin initially worked as a stockbroker with substantial income, a beautiful wife, and 5 children, living quite comfortably. But later, he heeded his inner calling to become a professional painter. He quit his job, severed all family ties, embraced solitary creation, and eventually died on a remote Pacific island. Yet this period is regarded as Gauguin's most mature and significant phase. His masterpiece, Where Do We Come From? What Are We? Where Are We Going? Was completed during this time. We readily understand that any great achievement demands immense time and arduous work. For Kant and Gauguin, intimacy might bring happiness, but could also drain energy and hinder their work. Thus, balancing both, they consciously chose solitude and their life's work. This concludes the second point I've shared with you. Solitude is both an ability and a conscious personal choice. Now, let's explore the third question. How important is solitude to us? Storr tells us solitude isn't just less frightening. It actually has many valuable functions. Without solitude, many things might truly remain unaccomplished. First function, solitude sparks imagination. Human imagination surpasses all other species. It enables creating what didn't exist, making life more convenient and enriched. Great discoveries often originate in imagination, like Einstein conceiving relativity by imagining an observer traveling near light speed. Yet solitude provides fertile ground for imagination to flourish. Imagination typically peaks during childhood. Storr observed that children forced into solitude, though perhaps less happy, develop richer imaginations. From Freud's perspective, we imagine because inner needs go unmet. Fantasy compensates for what's lacking. He even asserted that truly content people don't need imagination. Some children neglected by parents retreat into imagination to satisfy their craving for love. Thus, compared to non-lonely peers, their imaginations become more developed. Beatrix Potter, UK's treasured children's author and creator of Peter Rabbit, exemplifies this. Her childhood was profoundly lonely, though wealthy, raised by a nanny, dining in the nursery, taking brief solitary walks, never attending school or meeting other children. Her parents rarely interacted with her, never hosted guests. The home suffocated with silence. Though tutors later taught her various subjects, she spent most time alone. To combat loneliness, he acquired pets: a rabbit, a pair of mice, several bats, and a group of snails. Later, Potter's biographer described her life. Potter befriended these animals like a solitary prisoner bonding with cell mice. These animal companion days became Potter's primary creative wellspring. Her children's books, Peter Rabbit, Squirrel Nuck, and Jemima Puddle Duck, influenced generations. Sadly, Potter's creative peak lasted only about a decade. At 47, she married a lawyer. Domestic life and sheep farming replaced solitude, drying up her inspiration. She never wrote children's books again. Potter's case shows solitude provided fertile imagination, while worldly happiness pulled her from creativity. Beyond childhood, adults forcibly disconnected from society also develop extraordinary imagination and creativity. Great works require prolonged, deep thought and arduous labor. Both demand solitude. Imprisonment and illness create ideal conditions for such contemplation. Forced isolation grants creators fresh perspectives on life, fueling great works. Many penned classics while imprisoned. The Roman philosopher Boethius wrote his timeless Consolation of Philosophy in jail. Before imprisonment as consul, he lacked time for philosophical thought. Others, like Beethoven, whose deafness severed sensory links, turned inward, growing irritable yet profoundly focused. His most monumental works emerged as his hearing deteriorated. When his Ninth Symphony premiered, Beethoven couldn't hear the thunderous applause. Critics note deafness freed Beethoven from virtuoso expectations and external constraints. He communicated only with himself, focusing solely on his thoughts and music, letting imagination flourish to create works surpassing his previous masterpieces. Okay, we've covered solitude's role in sparking imagination. Now let's explore its second function, healing emotional wounds. First, consider this common life example. When stressed or troubled, many say, "I need quiet time," essentially seeking solitude. We withdraw to be alone because solitude frees us from judgment, allowing emotional release and space to process challenges. This deeply personal process requires solitary completion. An extreme case, bereavement, losing loved ones ranks among life's greatest pains. When grieving, others' comfort helps minimally, share only a fraction of the pain. Well-meaning people often distract the bereaved with activities or constant chatter. Psychological research shows these helpful acts often backfire, failing to ease grief. Outings or conversations subtly signal stop grieving rather than truly comforting. Profound grief demands full emotional release. Solitude provides this space, accelerating healing. Solitude's third function is self-integration. Integration means absorbing, understanding, and processing memories. We encounter countless daily events, not all instantly digestible. Integration organizes chaotic information, filing it appropriately in our mental archives. This recovers lost memories, reveals true needs. Better integration reduces inner turmoil. Solitude helps us achieve this integration. It helps us find and return to our true selves. Psychologist Jung called this process individuation. Jung was first to identify midlife crises and specialized in treating middle-aged adults. Hence, individuation primarily targets this group. Jung discovered in therapy that many midlife psychological issues stem from self-deception and deviation from one's authentic path. For example, someone passionate about singing takes a bank job for stability. By midlife, they realize they've lived contortedly without knowing how to change, leading to psychological distress. In therapy, Jung encouraged clients to reserve daily solitude for active imagination exercises. Active imagination is essentially a daydreaming state. Jung urged clients to record fantasies during active imagination without judgment, letting thoughts roam freely to unlock repressed emotions. Active imagination yields two outcomes: rediscovering neglected passions or embracing one's current self with newfound peace. The other is clients changing self-attitudes, accepting reality and reconciling with themselves, regaining serenity. The individuation process, especially active imagination, requires solitary completion. Through this lonely journey, clients achieve self-integration. Beyond individuation, three crucial solitude forms exist. These help accomplish self-integration. First is sleep. Regardless of relationships, everyone spends 1/3 of life sleeping alone, a vital integrative function. Many experience this. When struggling with decisions, we say, sleep on it, revisit tomorrow. Waking up, solutions often emerge clearly. Students know this well. Unsolvable problems yield to sleep-inspired epiphanies. Unmemorable texts become easier after rest. The second is creative incubation. This approach targets creators during idea incubation. They develop concepts, then research extensively. Over time, gathered materials ferment and integrate, forming new ideas. This phase may last minutes or years. Naturally, this solitary process requires quiet contemplation, regardless of duration. Anyone who's conceptualized articles or products will recognize this process. The third self-integration method is prayer. Prayer often seeks inner peace and emotional depth rather than material gains. In Western tradition, prayer is solitude with divine presence. This allows disconnected emotions and thoughts to interact, achieving new integration. Modern practices like yoga and meditation offer similar benefits. All right, that concludes the book's third key insight. Solitude serves multiple purposes. We all need it. We've covered solitude's three primary functions: sparking imagination, self-healing, and self-integration. Well, this essentially completes our book exploration. Has this changed your perspective on solitude? It fuels creative work, heals pain, and achieves self-integration. Without solitude, our lives would lack profoundly. Ultimately, both intimacy and solitude fulfill our deepest needs. Storr noted humans are driven by opposing forces: longing for companionship and intimacy, and yearning for independence, solitude, and autonomy. Neither force is inherently superior. Both are personal choices. That concludes loneliness. Returning to the self. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.